Hello, Internet! Welcome to episode 269 of the Assorted Calibers podcast. The second minute podcast is a little bit for everyone. I'm Weer'd, and with me tonight is my lovely hostess, Erin Paulette. How you doing, Erin?
I'm tired. It's been a long week. It's been a stressful week, but as I have mentioned on my blog and on social media, things are mostly back to normal, but for sake of completeness, I'll mention it here. So, Mom came back from the hospital on Wednesday, and she's been doing a lot better. And I took her to see the cardiologist today, which is Monday, October the 2nd. And I really like the guy. It's the first time I'd met him, but he is very pleasant and knowledgeable, and he enjoys answering questions, and he actively solicits patient feedback, and so that's really good. So the cardiologist thinks that she's doing okay, especially for an 84-year-old woman who had a STEMI, a catheterization, and a stent put into one of her heart arteries. I don't remember which one, a week ago. He thinks that her blood pressure is still too high. I mean, go figure. She had a heart attack, and we've both been eating mountains of stress since like February. So he wants her to stay on blood thinners and take meds that lower blood pressure and reduce cholesterol. It's all very standard stuff, but he really didn't seem all that concerned by it. It was, yeah, you're here and you're doing well and everything's great. So the 50% blockage, it's not going to be treated directly. It'll just be watched and, proactively done with like medications and diet and things like that. And she does have a low-level stress test scheduled for next week. So if there are any other problems that are lurking, hopefully we'll find them. I saw a picture of her angiocardiogram, whatever, which for people who don't know what that is, okay, so it's an X-ray, but X-rays can't really see soft tissue. They can really only see the dense bones. So what they do is, as part of the catheterization, they will inject dye into the blood that shows up on the X-rays so that you can actually see the blood vessels. And, there's the artery and everything looks normal. And then it looks like one of those, sausage balloons with a part that isn't inflated. And it's just that little tiny bit at the end. And it was just, oh, wow. Yeah, that artery should not be doing that. Mm-hmm. It's certainly a startling thing to look at when you go, why is it compressed? And he explained to me, okay, it's not actually compressed. It's just what you're seeing is the blood flow, not the vessel itself. And so what he figures happened is she had 30% blockage, which is fairly normal, and then a blood clot formed somehow, and then it sort of ran aground onto that blockage, and that's what caused the obstruction. Mm-hmm. So she's doing a whole lot better now, and she's going to have to watch her diet, and we're not entirely sure what else. We're waiting for the stress test, but in terms of heart attacks, I feel like this is about the best she could have had. So yeah, we'll be taking it one day at a time, and hopefully we can reduce the stress in the house. I'm not really sure how, but that's my hope.
Well, I can openly say it right now, because now she's been looked over, and hopefully that we're more or less out of the woods on that. Knock on wood that I'm not jinxing anything. But I was saying to you, has anybody talked about bypasses? And
no.
You said you hadn't heard anything about that, and I'm like, that's a good thing to hear. But that is definitely something that can happen when heavy blockage is found. That actually happened to a coworker of mine. He had, I think it was literally like a full year of misery where he got very, very ill. and was just out for a couple of days, and then he was coming in and he didn't look great and he was starting to lose weight. And finally we're just like, hey, what's going on, man? You're really looking bad. You should, he's like, well, yeah, I got really sick, but I'm starting to feel better now. So I think I'm going to be feeling better. And then a week later, like, he was still looking bad. And I'm just like, you need to go to the doctor. And went to the doctor, and the doctor went, oh yeah, no, you have acute appendicitis. And the reason why I was feeling better was your appendix ruptured, and that relief of pressure felt good. The problem is that, now you have, septicemia. And so he was at home on IV antibiotics to kill all the infection in him. And then once that went away, then they're like, well, if you've had a ruptured appendix, you're that much higher to have appendicitis again. And so they said, we're just going to take it out. So we're just going to do it as non-emergency surgery. So we're just going to start doing the pre-screening stuff. And when they did the pre-surgical screen, they found that he had several arterial blockages. And so they said, oh yeah, well, first you need a quadruple bypass, and then we can take out your appendix.
Oh, good Lord.
Yeah. So then he went through got his sternum popped open and had a quadruple bypass. And then once he had fully recovered from that, which took months, then they went, okay, now we can take your appendix out.
Yeah. The only thing the doctors have said in terms of operation is you don't need one. Yeah. We can treat all of this. Mm-hmm. I don't remember the exact term, but maybe they said prophylactically or whatever. It's just, we don't need to do procedures. We'll just put you on meds and we'll watch your diet and we'll keep a close eye on things. And we don't think you're going to need any more of any sort of operation, including a stent.
Oh, that's awesome.
It's like,
because
really
another option is an angioplasty, where they just essentially insert a catheter into that narrowed spot and essentially blow up a balloon inside of it to kind of push the stuff down. But they may not even do that as much anymore. I haven't heard about it in a while, because one issue that they had with that was, as you were noting, a clot likely hit that blockage and got stuck and then caused an occlusion of blood flow, which then causes the heart muscle to die. And that is very miserable. Well, one of the issues that can happen is when you blow that balloon up, it can knock some of the plaque off the wall, and that can cause little rafts of plaque to be floating through your system, and they can get stuck in various places. Ideally not in either the heart or the brain. So yeah, it's amazing news that your mom will likely get it all done with diet, exercise, and medication rather than further procedures.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like I tell people, when I say mom is healthy, I don't mean for an 84-year-old. I mean she's healthy, period. For an 84-year-old, she's phenomenal.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. She seems like a tough old bird.
Well, I've told this story before, I don't think on the podcast, but sometime around 10 years ago or so, she was bitten on the little finger by a pygmy rattlesnake. Now, when I say pygmy, I don't mean just, like a tiny baby. I mean, that's a specific species of rattlesnake. And the thing about pygmies is they don't have a lot of control with their venom. And so when they bite, they are more likely just to pump all of their venom load into you. And so, mom was out there and she got bitten, and she says, or, right before she got bitten, she sort of had an idea, this is like ideal habitat for a rattlesnake. And then she got bitten. And I bring that up because if she hadn't made that connection, she might have thought that she had gotten stung by something and then not gone looking for a snake. And then it could have been so much worse. So anyway, she comes in and pounds on the door and says, I've been bitten by a rattlesnake. And I basically teleport out of bed into my clothes and we're headed out the door. And we get her to the hospital. and they start treating her with the antivenin. And Mom has a lot of allergies, and as it turns out, she was allergic to the antivenin too, and it crashed her blood pressure and heart rate and things like that. And so the doctor's going, well, if we keep giving her the antivenin, then she's gonna die. So we're gonna just work on keeping her alive and hope that the venom doesn't destroy the hand. And when I say her hand swelled, I mean that her fingers looked like Vienna sausages, and her hand looked like a balloon, and I couldn't see pores, and it was swollen not all the way just up her forearm, but also onto her bicep. And it didn't turn like necrotic black, but like that nasty blue-green of a really deep bruise. Mm-hmm. And we're all going, oh my God, what's she gonna lose? And so she was in her 70s at the time, and when all was said and done, she didn't lose anything, and to the best of her knowledge, she doesn't think she lost any strength or dexterity in her hand. I mean, she may have lost some, but it was like a percent or two. It wasn't noticeable to her. And so, yeah, she is a tough old lady.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
There's like there was a D&D group that had that, where there was a skill feat or something that was just like extra high constitution. It is one of those like, all right, if you roll above, it's like, just like Mother used to make. And that's your mom with rattlesnake venom. I remember drinking this as a kid.
Yeah, she's definitely got a bonus to her fortitude save.
Yeah, it's been one thing after another around here. Nothing even remotely, like, it all pales in comparison to you, but it's one of those like, oh, can't I just have just like a moment where there's like not a fire that needs to get put out? I've just been running around so much, just helping out various family members. My daughter was homesick from school today. Thankfully it was just a quick thing that seems to have run its course, because she was doing just fine. Actually went out and delivered her paper route, and this was the first one that went really without a hitch, where she wasn't concerned or nervous about things causing extraneous issues, and we just banged it out. It went really, really well, and she's talking about doing it solo soon, so we shall see. But yeah, so it's been a busy day. We've got a bunch of news to discuss, and I feel underprepared, but I will do my best. Oh, so yeah. Shall we talk about the big news of the day?
I mean, which one? We have several.
There is several, but the major news story that I think everyone's talking about, not just Second Amendment podcast, is that Senator Dianne Feinstein has passed away. She was the oldest living member of Congress. She was 90 years old, and and so it shouldn't have come as much of a surprise. I mean, she had contracted shingles and it had some like serious complications with it earlier on this year, and was out for over a month. And then when she came back, I mean, she had like lost the use of one of her eyes and was really in tough shape. And a reporter asked her, how does it feel to be back? And she says, I've been here the whole time. Got really cantankerous about it. So yeah, she was not doing well. And so she has,
she was really not doing well, because I recall she had missed something like 100 votes while recovering.
Yeah.
From, I believe it was shingles.
Yep. Yeah. It was, it was complications with shingles. I don't remember the full story behind it, and that's outside the scope of this podcast. But yeah, she was very, very, very ill, and then she succumbed to her illness. I will say that she was not a friend of the Second Amendment. Obviously, San Francisco politicians rarely are. Obviously, we're seeing Gavin Newsom used to be the mayor of San Francisco, and we've been talking about him on many occasions, and this will not be the last show where we mention Gavin Newsom's name. Kamala Harris also is from San Francisco, and she is quite hostile to the Second Amendment. So it's pretty unsurprising that was going through. And I will say, in light of saying anything snide or anything coy about the passing of Dianne Feinstein, I will say that she did do one favor to Second Amendment supporters inadvertently. And
she said the quiet part out loud?
She said the quiet part out loud.
California Senator Dianne Feinstein worked for more than a year to get the assault weapons bill passed in the face of ferocious opposition from the National Rifle Association. She says she got the best she could.
If I could have gotten 51 votes in the Senate of the United States for an outright ban, picking up every one of them, Mr. and Mrs. America, turn them all in, I would have done it. I could not do that. The votes weren't here.
Yeah, so she was Beto O'Rourke before Beto O'Rourke. So yeah, that was definitely. I mean, that was a clip that got widely used. I mean, even back in this was back in the 90s. So back before there was even podcasts or YouTube or anything like that, where you could easily just spam audio from various things. But any Second Amendment group, I'm sure Cam Edwards played it a ton of when he was on the radio. And so, yeah, that was a statement on they've always been coming for our guns. That's always been the goal. That's always it. If they say that no one's coming for your guns, they're lying.
The one thing I do want to point out, and I've got attributions for this, is that, okay, she was anti-gun, but she also had a concealed carry permit. I believe the only concealed carry permit that was allowed in San Francisco at the time.
I had forgotten that, and that is 100% true. She, for a while, was the only concealed permit holder in the city of San Francisco.
Mm-hmm.
And now, to this day, I don't think that they've. I don't know. That's a little inside baseball for me, but I don't know if there was any caving that they have done since NYSERPA, but there was, I mean, less than 50 permit holders in the entire city of San Francisco. So yeah, she was one of the few, and actually, I've been interested to know like what she was carrying and how often she did carry.
Well, according to this article from the LA Times, she carried a snub-nose 38.
Okay, yeah, the classic.
And there we go. It's a 5-shot.
Yep. So probably a Smith & Wesson, not a Colt.
Mm-hmm.
So, which is surprising because I always heard people say that it was east of the Mississippi you go for you go for the Smith & Wessons, and west of the Mississippi you go for Colts.
Now, I will say, just in fairness, that she did give up carrying the gun well before she passed the assault weapons ban, well before she made the Mr. and Mrs. America Turn 'em All In speech. So there's that. And I say that more for reasons of journalistic integrity than an attempt to be fair. I did not like the woman. I found her to be incredibly hypocritical, not only because of that, but because her husband made large amounts of money. I don't remember the details, but I do know that he, I don't know if you could really call him an arms contractor, but he did things with the United States military. And, it was related to the military arms industrial complex. And I'm sure some people will say that there's a difference between arming the military and being an armed civilian. And I'm not going to have that argument with people because I have it all the time. So I'm just going to conclude with a quote that may have been said by Mark Twain or may have been said by Clarence Darrow. And it comes down to, I've never wished a person dead, but I have read some obituaries with great pleasure.
Mm-hmm.
Call me petty, I don't care.
No, I mean, it would be the woman did nothing positive for me, and till the end, she was definitely a solid vote against our rights. So, her moving on, I could say that I can have glee, both in the fact that she was an enemy to us, but also because she was clearly in that stage of life where death was a mercy because she was not doing well. So, I'll leave it at that as not to get too much dancing on the woman's grave, but I will note that she is going to leave us some interesting fireworks that are going to be coming through. This will be interesting to see because Gavin Newsom has appointed her replacement.
Oh, already? Okay, I thought he was holding off in order to show respect.
No, and her name is Laphonza Butler. And she is she hasn't really been a politician before, as far as I know. She was the president of Emily's List, which I'm not super familiar with that. Actually, I heard it and I immediately went to Angie's List, which is where you can find contractors. Yeah. But let's see let's do a quick Wikipedia. It's a political action committee. So she was not directly a politician, but she was working in favor of politicians and helping helping raise money for various people. So. Okay, so she had definitely paid the piper multiple times, and so this could be deemed as a repayment. And I say that with a bit of a snideness because she's from a suburb of San Francisco, which is where Dianne Feinstein is from. That suburb is Silver Springs, Maryland.
Yeah, I was about to say, I've just now discovered this, and I was hoping you would have more information on that.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, it looks like she's from Maryland, and I was really under the impression, I'm not being sarcastic here, I really thought you had to be a resident of the state before you could be elected or be appointed a political position there.
Yes, actually, a friend of mine was actually digging. He was like, "Wait a second, how could this happen?" So, when I say she's from Maryland, she is from Maryland. Like she voted like last year in a Maryland election. She is currently registered to vote in Maryland, and as far as anything I have read, she doesn't even own property in California. Like I thought for sure it'd be like, Mitt Romney. I assume he probably had property in Utah, just naturally he's got so much family out there and all that. But I mean, obviously his primary living was Belmont, Massachusetts for pretty much as long as anyone's known the name Mitt Romney. But he had a vacation home on Lake Winnipesaukee, as most wealthy Massachusetts people do, and so he went and changed that lake house to his primary residence. And I can't remember if he tried to run for senator or governor, but it went so poorly that nobody actually remembers exactly what it was, because it never really got off the ground. It never made it to a general election. But yes, she doesn't even, as far as I know, own a summer home in California in any place. I can't even obviously California is a gigantic state, so I can't even say that whether she's, a Northern Californian like Dianne Feinstein and Gavin Newsom and Kamala Harris, or a Southern Californian, in the LA or San Diego area. So yeah, she is not from there at all. And a buddy of mine posted, he's like, "Are you serious? Like, I don't know if that's possible." And said actually cited the case law. No person shall be a senator who shall not have attained the age of 30 years and has been 9 years a citizen of the United States, and who shall not, when elected, be an inhabitant of the state of which he shall be chosen. Obviously, this is old law with the masculine pronouns, all that, and so. But it does not say legal resident; it says inhabitant. So and
yeah, okay. We would need to know the legal definition of inhabitant, though, and honestly, it sounds to me, just with my English background, that inhabitant is more restrictive, because if you're an inhabitant, you are literally living there. Whereas if you are a resident, you may be, legally registered as residing there, but, actually living somewhere else. Like, the classic example is if you are a member of the military and you are stationed overseas, you can maintain your legal residency in whatever state you were in before you were transferred. So, if you were a Texas resident and you were at Fort Hood and then they transferred you to, Ramstein Air Force Base in Germany, you wouldn't be voting in German elections because you're not a citizen there. So you would be considered still a legal resident of Texas, even though you are currently inhabiting a house or an apartment or a barracks or whatever in Germany. Of course, we know that legal definitions are very strange because, just as an example, the legal definition of what a machine gun is and what you and I would consider a machine gun are two different things. Because when I hear machine gun, I think belt-fed and a crew-served support weapon, whereas the legal definition is, 2 or more bangs per trigger pull. So,
or even something as simple as like a lightning link or a drop-in auto sear.
Yeah.
So that's the simple, a very, very simple, inert piece of sheet metal is considered a machine gun.
A piece of string and a belt loop.
Yeah. There is the shoestring that is the shoestring with a keychain on it is a registered machine gun as well. But yeah, we will see. Again, you have a lot of questions. I think the whole world has a lot of questions, and we will see where that goes. But I think that this will be an interesting race. Not to get too deep into politics that does not apply to the Second Amendment, but I think this will absolutely be something. If you are like me, whose brain that watches men chasing balls around a field, not something entertaining at all, but watching elections that are full of people that have absolutely no effect on my life is something that I absolutely enjoy. I love watching politics, and I even love watching politics where, hey, none of these politicians are good politicians or good people, but man, they're playing the game really well. So this will be an interesting game to watch because she's not a resident of California right now, and so either she's going to, and she's a resident of Silver Springs, Maryland, which is a suburb of DC, so she's already in a good place to good place to go to Capitol Hill, and so we will see how this goes, both on if it can be challenged by anybody, or if anyone will bother challenging it, saying that it's not a valid appointment, and what happens with her. Is she going to be like, I think his name was Paul Kirk, and I say that is because he's literally like a bar trivia question, is the person who became the U.S. Senator directly after Ted Kennedy died, and essentially just filled his seat until the special election that elected Scott Brown went through. But yeah, so will she be like that, where she'll just sit out the remainder of Senator Feinstein's term and then step down, or will she attempt to run for re-election and see where that gets her? And will the people of California, no matter what their politics are, be interested in someone who has had no ties? I mean, she was, I did a little research on her. She was born in Mississippi and then lived there for most of her life. And then moved to Silver Springs, essentially to become part of this pack. She essentially moved to DC to pursue a political career, and not in the elected official level, but in the working with politicians and helping people win elections. And so yeah, this is going to be an interesting case. But either way, guess what? She's from Mississippi, so that's not as bad as just being a forever Maryland resident or a forever California resident. But
well, yes, but given that she's being appointed by Gavin Newsom, the man who has made a crusade to repeal the Second Amendment without actually repealing the Second Amendment. We talked about that a while ago. We know she's going to be a gun prohibitionist because he wouldn't appoint her if she wasn't.
Yeah. Not only is Gavin Newsom anti-gun, but he is making it a priority to be anti-gun. So yeah, this is a big deal. As far as that goes, she is definitely the votes have not changed anywhere, but it will be interesting to see if she sticks around, because there's definitely some shenanigans. I wasn't able to find one that wasn't behind a paywall, but I found if you do, I was doing the Google search for the quote that was quoted on Wikipedia saying that no, she's not a resident of California right now, but she will be registered to vote in California by the time she's sworn in. And that will also be interesting to see, because a lot of times to get registered to vote, you actually have to, well, I don't know if you have to live there for that long, because actually I registered to vote in Massachusetts very, very shortly after I moved down here. But essentially I had to surrender my main driver's license and all that. So I don't know. We will see. This will be something to watch. And we've really talked far too much about it. But the other one, this one was like, you said to me, Weer'd, this needs to be in the show, and I'm like, oh yeah, no, I already have this lined up to talk about, because yeah, this is a very much a Second Amendment news story. But yeah, do you want to pitch it, or do you want me to?
Well, I want you to pitch it, but here's what I want to say before we get into it. The original incident happened in April of this year, and we hadn't heard about it. The only time I heard about it, and the only time you heard about it, was this weekend, or Friday, when the verdict was announced. And I'm just wondering how the heck we missed something like this.
I mean, I had actually heard about it when it happened, but I didn't know who this person was, and I really didn't know the circumstances. And the big thing that really kind of put it on my radar was that the actual video footage was released of this event. And so, not to bury the lead, a YouTuber, I've got to look him up because I don't know who he is, and
So I'm going to take the position that we don't name him.
You know what? I am very, very comfortable. Let's just say, so this person is a YouTuber. They call this they call this pranks on multiple levels. It's not pranks. This guy is a professional a-hole. Is an absolute professional a-hole, and the purpose of their channel is they go into public places and act obnoxious to see what people do when they throw them out. And essentially every video they do is them getting thrown out of public places.
This person is a bully who has managed to monetize bullying on YouTube.
Yes. And may we mention that this is not just him. There is a whole just like there is the gun tube. And if you listen to this podcast, you're likely watching, Demolition Ranch and Brandon Herrera and Donut Operator and all of these other, Grand Thumb doing these various, Second Amendment and firearms related YouTube channels. And these people have been, we've talked about it on the show. These people have been absolutely getting dragged over the coals. Like for a while, people were getting like channel strikes, and it's 3 strikes and you're out. Once you have the 3rd strike, they actually delete your channel and delete all your videos. And so whatever you don't have backed up is gone, and your entire platform for distributing those videos is gone.
Okay, so I feel like we're getting way into the weeds here.
Yeah.
So you've got this YouTube bully who harasses people under the name of pranks, and when people get offended, it's just a prank, yo. And he went too far, and in April of this year, the man who he was harassing, I'm not sure if we should say his name or not.
Let's not bother. We don't need to name anything. We can say harasser, and we could say victim. Okay.
Mainly because this man has been dragged through a lot. But the person that he was harassing drew a gun and shot him. Now, the harasser lived, and the shooter was arrested. And the fact that there was a trial in September when the incident happened in April is shockingly fast to me. Usually, the defendants waive their right to a speedy trial, and it takes a year or more. Based upon some very cursory investigation, I'm guessing it was sped up because the judge denied him bail, and he decided he didn't want to spend a year or more rotting in jail, and so he went for a speedy trial. And so the short version here, well, I don't know if we should do that. I don't know if we should jump to the verdict or we should talk about the circumstances surrounding the shooting. What do you think?
Let's jump to the verdict first, and then we could go back, because I think that's
okay.
That's where the magic is.
Okay, so the verdict is very odd.
Very odd.
This man, he pulled a gun and he shot the harasser, did not kill him. And he was prosecuted for whatever the Virginia statute is for attempted murder. They've got a specific term for it. I'm drawing a blank, but it's something like grievous bodily harm or something like that. And so the jury deliberated, came back, said, we really don't know what to do. The judge sent him back, said, don't come back until you have a decision. And they decided that they would find the shooter innocent of whatever the charge is for attempted murder, which means that they declared it was, justifiable self-defense. But they also decided he was guilty of the lesser crime, which apparently has a pretty hefty punishment to it. I thought it was just going to be a misdemeanor, but apparently the punishment for firing a gun in a public space is something like a couple of years. So he's still facing some jail time. But they found him guilty of that. And that seems very strange to me, because if the jury says you're justified in shooting this guy, then you can't say, but you shouldn't have shot inside a building. And you have said, and I agree, a lot of people are saying that this is a slam dunk for appeal. I just don't understand how the jury made that decision.
Well, I think I'm trying to remember if it was Oddball or somebody else when we were talking about this before the show, but was saying that probably the angle that they're going to go at is that the jury was given improper instructions. So the thing that he was found guilty of was, and it's not in this article, but it was in another one of the articles I read, was essentially the firing into an occupied dwelling. If you've been a longtime fan of the show and were listening to us back in the Gun Blog Variety Cast days, Sean Sorrentino would do the felons behaving badly segment, and one of the charges that he would often read about is firing into an occupied building. Essentially, if you're doing like a drive-by shooting and the bullets hit a house that has people inside of it, that is an additional grievous charge. And the fact that he's inside a shopping mall and there were lots of people around and he fired off a gun. So that's why it's got that extra, it's not a trivial charge. But again, I note that, my town, the town I grew up in Maine, pretty much every place that I you can ever find me in Massachusetts has a no discharge of firearms ordinance in place. Pretty much any place that's got a large population, going through will often have an ordinance that says no discharge of firearms. So I can't set up a firing range in my backyard. I wouldn't, because there's not really any safe way of doing it, because I live in such a heavily settled area. But they'll do that. But that ordinance does have essentially a rider that in the event that you are justifiably defending your life, yes, you can shoot a firearm to, defend your life against a person or an animal. If there was a, coyote, supposedly, one of my neighbors actually said that they just saw a coyote walking through the neighborhood just tonight. Their dog was all skittish when they walked by, like, oh yeah, we saw a coyote, and he's all up in he's all up in his hackles. So yeah, if you were to worry that a coyote was going to come after your dog and you shot the coyote, you really shouldn't be charged with the discharging a firearm, within town limits. And likely that you can't expect the jurors to know that. They are not lawyers. They don't know the statutes. And so it should have been in the jury instructions. If he is guilty, if he is innocent of the charges and it's deemed self-defense, then therefore that allows him to get past that. And so I think we're pretty sure from our combined knowledge that if he appeals his conviction, he's also not opening himself up for a retrial on the self-defense. So if he can do that, it seems like a slam dunk case of saying, I justifiably defended myself. The judge said so. The jury said so. So therefore, under Virginia law, I was justifiably defending my life when I discharged my firearm. And so therefore I will, that charge should be nullified because I can shoot in an occupied dwelling if I'm in fear for my life, which I was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it seems slam dunk to me and to you, but we aren't lawyers. There might be something going on. But hopefully this will be discharged or dissolved or whatever the proper term is. Vacated?
Yeah, I will just say that, I hope that a Virginia lawyer's already contacted him. Obviously this is a national news story. A Virginia lawyer has contacted him with the knowledge more knowledge than we have because we're not lawyers. And because I will say that I have gone onto this quote unquote YouTube pranksters channel just to see if he put up anything from the day he was shot and if he was still active and what his channel looked like. And every single one of his videos is deeply ratioed, where there is like 10 times the number of dislikes to likes. And very many of
and all sorts of comments about hey, you should have gotten killed, you should have died.
Yeah.
What's it say when a jury of your peers says that shooting you was a good thing, etc., etc.
Mm-hmm. And I think now's a good time to say, go into the show notes and click on the click on the first link for this. And the story that says, the father of YouTubers shot at Dulles Town Center calls not guilty verdict mob rule, which may not be wrong because there's an embedded YouTube video at the bottom of the article of the prankster and his mother in front of there, and he is doing what I have learned is kind of a standard shtick in his channel, which is standing there with his mouth open and his eyes squinting like I think he's trying to give the impression that he might be either mentally challenged or on drugs. And that's what he'll do. Like, he'll walk into the middle of like a car dealership and just stand there and stare at the wall with his mouth open and just look like he's like high out of his mind. And he's being interviewed by the press about the person who shot him, essentially being found not guilty of shooting him, being justified in shooting him. And his response is to stand there with his mouth open and looking like a fool to get laughter. And when his mother turns around and sees that he's doing this, she just laughs like, oh, that's just him being him. And so, yeah, these are terrible people. Mm-hmm. And I've got to wonder if there is the term that he has a punchable face. And yeah, I think the jury may have had some of that because, Aaron, how do you feel about the? You definitely watched the footage of him getting shot.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel about this shoot?
Okay, I have very strong feelings about this shoot, and I need to not let my personal opinions get in the way. So, I mentioned bullying behavior, and I can say that with a fair degree of authority because I was bullied throughout, elementary school and junior high, and only reason I didn't get bullied in high school, I think, is because I established myself as being weird and unpredictable enough that they didn't know what I was going to do. But this is classic bully behavior. The harasser is, I think at one point I saw 6'5". He's quite tall, and he's not muscular, but he's hefty. He's at least 200 pounds, if not more. So he's got the bully build.
He's very broad-shouldered.
Yes, and so he when he picks the victim is a man who's shorter than him by, it looks like at least a foot, if not more, and is a very slight man who is working as a DoorDash driver, and so he has just picked up food from a fast food place, and his hands are full. And so the harasser comes up, and he's got a smartphone, and the smartphone is playing a video clip. And, okay, Weer'd, I'm going to ask you not to censor this because I think it's important that our listeners hear it for context. I'm only going to say it once. And I believe it's something like, hey, dipshit, why can't you stop thinking about my twinkle? And the driver doesn't know what's going on, and then the bully keeps pressing that button. Now, before I describe what happens next, I want to make something clear. And once again, Weer'd, I'm going to ask you not to censor this because I think it's relevant. So you've got a large man who is looming over a smaller man. So the harasser and his friend, who's pointing a finger at the driver, they basically got him backed into the corner, or not the corner, the counter of the fast food place. There doesn't appear to be any mall security around, and in fact, that's one reason why the harasser picked this area, because there weren't, there wasn't mall security around, and he's been trespassed from that mall before for harassing people. And so when you have a larger person harassing a smaller person and saying that, it was an accusation of homosexuality, which, given the culture in which I grew up, and I think large portions of the culture that still exists today, calling someone a homosexual is often a prelude to violence. And so, despite the cutesy, you can't stop thinking about my twinkle, what I really think the message was, hey, faggot, why are you thinking about my dick? And between that, the way he's shoving the phone at the man in a very aggressive style, the way he's looming, the way he tries to pin the man, not physically, but just sort of through body presence, you pin him up against the counter.
He definitely corners him for a moment.
Yes, and so the man is like, "What? No, get away!" And he tries to. Well, he does actually get away. He's moving away. They follow him. still playing the recording, still pushing it in his face. The man tries to slap the phone away, which, as Ian Runkle said, probably not a good idea, because, you do that and you damage his phone. They may go for the phone, they may go for you. And I don't quite know how long this has been going on for, but at one point, as he's trying to leave and they're still coming after him, he quickly reaches under his shirt, pulls out a gun, and just shoots the guy at like bad breath range. I mean, there's only like about 2 feet. I don't think he fully extended his hand. Maybe he did.
He fires once, which, by the way, I will say a lot of praise for that. He pulls the gun, fires once and only once, hits his target, and but he is close enough that he very obviously is not using the sights.
Oh yeah. And so I've got a lot of thoughts, and they're all trying to come out at once. And so, in no particular order, here are my thoughts. First of all, this is almost a textbook example of why you should carry pepper spray and when it would be a good idea to use it. Because pepper spray is non-lethal, and it's far easier to justify using on someone who potentially isn't a threat. And so if he had pulled out pepper spray, sprayed the crap out of this bully, I think at most he just would have been asked to leave the mall. Because, again, the bully has a history of this sort of behavior at that specific location. And, that would have been a happy ending for everyone except the bully, and I don't care that he gets a bad ending. The second thought is that if he had simply drawn a gun and, said in a loud voice, "Get away, back off," that sort of thing, well, one of two things would happen. Either the bully would realize that he's pushed the wrong person too far and back off and say, "Hey man, it's just a prank," in which case, basically a happy ending for everyone. Or the bully would have continued advancing, and anyone who advances on you when you have a gun drawn defensively clearly means you harm, and that's absolutely a justified self-defense shoot. Mm-hmm. I am not a lawyer, etc., but 99 point whatever % of the time, that's completely justified.
I will specify, make sure that the muzzle is pointed in a safe direction as you're brandishing. Have the gun down at your side, have the gun at a compressed low ready, compressed high ready, something like that, where you're very clearly not pointing the gun directly at the person, but you have it in such a situation that you can easily bring it to bear if need be. And that, because if you pull the gun and point it at them, well, then, I mean, this is something that we've said all the time about if you happen to be in a spree shooting, whether you're armed or not, if it's coming down to the shooter is coming into your area, you're probably already dead. So fight like there's no tomorrow, because there may not be. And mm-hmm. that could absolutely be a justification of if somebody pulls a gun on me and I am unarmed, I'm with my wife or my daughter or all of that, I may in a split second decide that the best course of action is to charge the person with the gun as a defensive move, not as an offensive move, just to either deflect the gun, disable the gun, draw the fire, whatever. So that's certainly the said. But if he had drawn it and kept it down on his side, mm-hmm. Or drawn it and gone into a compressed ready stance, and said back off, mm-hmm. it likely would have provoked an action, and the action it provoked would have removed all doubt one way mm-hmm. or the other.
So the third and final thought that I have here, and this one is going to spark a whole lot more debate. If the shooter had been a woman, I think there would be a lot less contention about this, because the disparity of force would have been much more obvious. 2 men versus 1 woman, one of them much taller and heavier than her. I think practically everyone is going to side with a woman defending herself. Now, I want to make very clear what I'm going to say next. I'm not saying anything bad about the DoorDash driver, but I'm going to say that he acted in a manner that is closer to how a woman would react than a man would react. And I'm not calling him names. I'm not calling him a coward or a sissy or effeminate. But what I'm saying is the standard masculine reaction to this sort of thing is to square up, raise your voice, and say, you got a problem? If not, actually throw a punch. What this man was doing was what women typically do, which was, de-escalate. Get that away from me. I don't know you. And try to leave. Which is why in women's self-defense classes, one of the things which is taught is you need to tell women to make a scene because they've been socialized all their lives to be accommodating, to not make a scene, to just get along and be good little girls and nice young ladies. And you need to teach them to square up and in a loud voice say, get away from me. And so the point I'm making here is this man reacted in a way that is more comparable to what a woman would do. And I think that it is very unfair to expect him to have squared up in the traditional masculine style. Because, again, he is smaller and slighter than the bully. And so for him to go, you know what, I'm being ganged up on, this guy is much heavier than me, for him to pull a gun and shoot, we wouldn't think twice if a woman did it. And so I think we should extend that benefit of the doubt to the driver. Now, in conclusion, before I hand this over to Weer'd, do I think this was a legally good shoot? Well, I mean, the jury seems to think so. I am not sure, but I find myself, as a result of these thoughts, specifically point 3, I'm going, he may not have been legally justified, but I really can't find it in my heart to condemn him morally. I'm not specifically saying the prankster should have died. I'm not even saying that the prankster should have been shot. But what I am saying is I am shedding no tears for this bully, and in the classic terminology, he effed around and he found out.
Yeah, all absolutely amazing points, and I'm not going to go too much further from any of those. I will say that in the course of doing the research for the show, I have watched multiple videos of people, people breaking this down, and multiple versions, and I actually just a few, a little bit before the show found a longer cut of the interaction, and it's not very long. Like, actually, the video that I posted had there were 3 people on the bully's team. And I don't think the DoorDash driver was aware of the third person. I think he was just aware of the 2 people that were getting up in his grill. Which, by the way, is another thing to notice for self-defense people and concealed carriers is you may see somebody robbing a store and all that and pull your gun on the person, but you may not realize that there's a lookout there that may be armed as well. And now all of a sudden you're going to get shot by somebody who's not in your line of sight.
Remember the lesson of Jurassic Park and watch out for the clever girl.
Oh, yes. That's a very good pull on that one, Aaron. So I will just say that overall, I concur with everything you said, Aaron. I mean, I really, really do. The one quibble that I think I have to add is my initial reaction when I saw when the actual video of the shooting first came out. Like I said, I heard about this story when it first happened, in the fact that it made a few headlines and it went around, but there was no video of the shooting, and so we didn't know the story. We didn't know who the person who they had had shot them, what the circumstances was of that. And so there, all I knew was that this YouTuber, who is a notorious a-hole, was shot by someone they were playing a quote unquote prank on, and that the person who had shot them was in jail. And so I didn't know. Did he pick on, the local hitter for the Crips gang? Or did he pick on a Vietnam vet who was not interested in any of that stuff? I don't know. Turned out it was a DoorDash driver, and we now have all the circumstances. And the first time I saw it, I'm like, that's a dirty shoot. And the reason why I have it is that he was backing away and was actually making some distance from them at the time of the shooting. Now, that being said, I mentioned the fact that he had been quartered. Essentially, he picked up the bags of food, and as soon as both his hands were occupied, this guy closed in, and he's a big dude, and the DoorDash driver is a slight dude, and got up in his face, held the phone up in his face, is kind of leering and glaring. He's very much got this like very, very strange deadpan look that he puts on when he's running his quote unquote pranks. And that's specifically to put people not at ease. I myself have trouble with, not to make any stigma, but people who have poorly controlled mental illness, people who, may have some intellectual deficits. I can get very, very nervous around them simply because they're unpredictable. They may get angry at something that I do not understand. And now all of a sudden it's gone from a calm situation to a violent situation. And I don't like that. And he definitely has that affect on him. Is he on drugs? Is he mentally challenged? Is something going on here? And he definitely has the guy cornered and is not speaking, is not addressing, is not responding. The guy's saying, get away from me. And there's nothing. And the moment that he's essentially pressed up against that little sneeze guard glass that's in food court, mall food court, fast food restaurants, the moment he's pressed up against that with a dude in front of him, if he had pulled the gun out at that moment and gave him a gut shot, I would have been I wouldn't have hesitated in saying that's a clean shoot. Mm-hmm. Had he, especially since there were two of them and the first guy had a foot on him and probably 100 pounds on him, and the other dude was at least the DoorDash driver's size, and there was at least two of them, and he didn't even realize there was a third, but it could be argued that he maybe saw the third guy filming as well and just wasn't paying that much of attention to him because that person was like 15 feet away while the other people were right on top of him. But he then slips away and is backing up. And that's the moment when he shoots. And that's what I've got the problem with. I would have also been cool if he had continued to back away, even with the gun, with either the gun drawn or the gun not drawn. And if they continued to pursue and they made up the gap and got back into his face again, I firmly advise against running away from an attacker, because to run away from somebody, it requires you turn your back on a threat, which is a bad thing. And it also requires you to be a faster runner than the threat. And he didn't know these people. He didn't know if this dude is one of these like scary fast sprinters. I'm not a particularly fast runner, so the chances of somebody outrunning me is extremely high. And so he was doing just the right thing he had his eyes on the guy. He was backing away. He was informing them to get away from him. A command voice probably would have been a little bit more advantageous of the be loud and be, and be without nuance. But if he had allowed him to close the distance again and shot, I probably would have also had less hesitation. The fact that he was just starting to get away when he pulled the gun and shot bothers me. But again, at no point in time am I disagreeing with anything that you said, Aaron. I have in the show notes, Runkle of the Bailey, doing his breakdown, and Runkle and you aligned very much on the fact that he considers this overall to be a very clean shoot. But again, Ian also says, hey, if he had pepper spray, that would have been awesome. And all that. If he had some empty hand fighting skills where he could have, thrown a punch and busted this guy's nose or lip, that's I've got no problem with that either. But just there's definitely some stuff. But I also have Mike from Hard to Hurt in there, and he is definitely a little bit closer aligned with me, though, like I said, I'm probably in between Ian and Mike. As far as my feelings goes, is I'm definitely, the more I watch this, the more I'm warming up to the self-defense. And again, I wasn't there. And so I can only imagine how much fear this guy may have been feeling because of the look in this guy's eye. And what the connotation of that phrase that was being repeated over and over on the phone was. So yeah, it's not the greatest self-defense shooting in the world, but by far not the worst. And I'm glad that he was acquitted of the major crime, and I hope that he will get a success story. I will say, if there's a lawyer in Virginia that thinks that the idea that because he was justified in self-defense, that's a clear cut and dry proposal, I would say don't be pro bono. Find a crowdfunding site that will tolerate crowdfunding for this guy, because I know that I think it was GoFundMe that Kyle Rittenhouse was on, and they kicked him off of it.
I think so, but I'm not certain.
Even though they were collecting money for the one of his victims, specifically the one that had a child with a woman who left him because he had physically abused her, and the money was being collected not by the woman who he'd abused and who had a child by him and is not going to be receiving any more payments if there was any payments to be had, but obviously the payments owed for child support. Instead it was going to the new girlfriend of the departed person, the guy with the skateboard. So he was able to get his funding, and that's another aspect of this that bothers me. But either way, because of the number of people that clearly hate this guy and are more than happy with him getting shot, that if all of them chipped in $5, that's enough to pay a lawyer plenty of money to appeal this case.
I can't find it, but I seem to recall reading that the DoorDash driver didn't, he obviously had a lawyer, but he had to have a public defender. He couldn't afford to have a paid lawyer.
I think I remember reading that as well, but again, don't quote us on that. And
so first of all, I mean, he needs the money, but also, I'm not entirely sure where Virginia falls in terms of being gun friendly, because on the one hand, they do have a stand your ground statute, and they obviously have concealed carry, but on the other hand, I've seen some things and I've heard some stories, so I'm not sure. But for this guy, even with all the complications of this case and a public defender to be acquitted of the major charge, I mean, either the public defender is, fantastic, perhaps a big name lawyer who's fulfilling some sort of, quota, or maybe this guy is really, really bad and a lot of people are sick of his crap. And I'm really thinking it's the latter. Given his performance to the press after the case, the fact that he can't even be serious in that event is showing that he is not a bright person, not a socially intelligent person, and just not a nice person at all. I mean, you mentioning about the woman thing, I posted a video in chat. I'll let the listeners go and find it, but essentially I didn't even watch more than like 2 minutes of this video, but essentially he puts on a yellow security vest and at the very, very start of the video stops a young lady and tells her that he's doing sobriety checks
and asks her if she'll do some sobriety tests for him. And she clearly gets uncomfortable, and I can only imagine how much she's tucking it in. Again, women are socialized not to make a scene. And I'll tell you, I was getting a very date rape feeling about his behavior. And she takes off. And then the first thing he says is like, "Oh my God, that's the most attractive woman I've ever seen." Wow. Creepy. Very, very, very creepy. So yeah, I suspect that this guy has a zero charisma, and the jury smelled it and was like, "You know what? I'd shoot him too."
That is kind of the feeling I got.
Yeah. So yeah, this is this is that. But again, one of the things I started talking about, but Aaron, you rightfully put me back on the rails, because we should have talked about all that we talked about first. But the fact that YouTube channels were getting strikes for loading a 30-round magazine into an AR-15, or threading a suppressor on, or, you know, to be talking about, like, channels are completely gone because they were giving instructions on hand loading ammunition, and that was considered against YouTube's terms of services. We can't have people telling people how to practice the art of hand loading ammunition, which is a very, very, interesting and nuanced art, and also completely legal. I've been hand loading in Massachusetts since I've started owning guns. It's legal here. It's a pain in the butt, but it's legal here, and it's legal everywhere. And yet this guy is, and yeah, maybe internationally it's not, but in the United States this is legal. And then this guy here is impersonating a police officer, security official, and trying to get women to do things for him, and is getting kicked out of malls, and is actively committing trespassing, and filming himself doing trespassing, and YouTube is giving him money. I gave him money just doing the research for this. Is sick, and YouTube should be ashamed of themselves for harming perfectly good and lawful people, but also helping these predators. So yeah, carry a gun, because you may get an opportunity to shoot a YouTube quote unquote prankster, but know the laws and know the situation so that you only do it when it's absolutely necessary. But a lot of these guys do some really scary stuff. Like there was one where like people were dressing up as clowns and running around with knives. And
yeah, the one I saw, it was in a parking garage at night, and as the victim turned to the corner, the clown would bring down a big mallet onto, like, I don't know if it was a balloon or a watermelon, but made to look like somebody's head. Mm-hmm. And then after committing murder, would then turn and start stalking after the person who saw it.
Yes. Yeah, I definitely saw that. Yeah. And it was, something. It was a mannequin with something on it that splattered when the hammer hit it. And it looked like, they had just smashed the skull of an unconscious person, and then turned and started coming after them with the mallet still in hand. And yeah, I believe there was one instance. I'm trying to remember if it was in Maine. I almost want to say it was in Maine, where someone was doing the clown prank, and they either got a gun pulled on them and changed their tune, or actually got shot. But I don't know about Maine, but this seemed familiar, and I did a Google search, and I then remembered us talking about it. So this was in February of 2021, and it was in Tennessee, and that's how I found it. Okay.
And so what happened was it happened in the parking lot of the Urban Air Trampoline and Adventure Park at about 9:30 at night. And so the prankster approached a group of people with what appeared to be a butcher knife. And so the concealed carrier pulled his gun and shot the prankster dead, because to all appearances, it looked like somebody had a big ass knife and was going to, kill people. And it was only after that, the prankster had been shot dead that it was revealed that it was all staged. Mm-hmm. So we've already had 2 people shot, 1 fatally. Can we put an end to YouTube pranks, please?
Yeah, and there are multiple others out there where someone does pull the gun but does not shoot, and the quote unquote prankster immediately changes their tune. So yeah, stop doing it. Stop doing it, and it's not okay. Yeah, and again, if you carry a gun, know the law, and probably wouldn't help to hurt to have a insurance type thing like USCCA or Armed Citizens Legal Defense Network. All right, let's turn to some good news, Aaron.
Well, I feel like this is a case of good news asterisk.
Well, yeah. I want to spin it just as good news, but you are correct.
All right, Weer'd. So what's the good news?
The good news is that I think we reported about it, but so California has a magazine ban, and it's a straight up magazine ban. It is no magazine that holds more than 10 rounds can be possessed within the state of California. So get them out of state, turn them into the police, or destroy them yourself. And obviously that was challenged by a number of political groups. I'm sure the Second Amendment Foundation was one of them, because they have lawsuits drafted for every law even before it becomes law. And it went to Judge Benitez. We've talked a lot about him. And
St. Benitez of the West.
Yes.
He of Freedom Week.
Yes. And he, of course, per the ruling, was like, yeah, no, this is unconstitutional. And I believe it got struck down by an en banc decision. Is that my correct memory of the timeline?
Well, I don't quite remember what you remember, and I think we talked about this somewhat last week, but yeah, he declared it was unconstitutional. The state appealed. It went to a 3-panel district court. I'm not really sure what they ruled, because then it went before an en banc panel, and then it somehow got escalated to SCOTUS, and then SCOTUS, who had just made a ruling on Bruen, sent this back to the court of origination saying, revisit this in the light of Bruen. And so Benitez did, and he made the exact same decision as before. And the state appealed this. And I remember talking about it last week. We weren't sure if they were going to, take their licks or risk having it affect the entire circuit, and they decided to do the latter. And what's interesting about this, and I will confess, I'm not fully conversant on how these things work at the circuit level. It's been a long week. I'm not at my best here. But what happened is that I don't even know who they are, but someone in the Ninth Circuit decided that they were going to completely skip the three judge panel, and then just go straight to en banc. And that seems dirty. And in fact, one of the 3 judges who was on that 3-judge panel, Judge Van Dyke, really had a problem with it. And there are some questions as to whether or not this is procedurally valid, and if it's not, does this invalidate the entire thing? And so that's pretty much the extent of my knowledge here, and I hope you've got something to bring to this.
I don't have a ton because I don't know about the procedural point of it, but I would say it doesn't seem dirty to me per se, because essentially if this, no matter how, if this rules, if this overrides Judge Benitez's decision, which of course I find to be perfectly sound, because again, we had high capacity magazines at the time of the Second Amendment and nobody cared. And for hundreds of years, there were high capacity magazines available to people. And there was no such thing as mag bans. Mag bans are extremely new to U.S. politics. But by going to the en banc decision, certainly has. I mean, I don't know how well the Ninth Circuit is made up to see if there are more pro-gun judges available. So therefore, it's a little bit more even en banc. But they don't have any place else to go within the Ninth Circuit, and so therefore, if they do rule that California's ban is perfectly fine and Judge Benitez was wrong in his decision, then there's no place else for them to go besides the Supreme Court of the United States. And I deeply suspect, because there have been a lot of essentially assault weapons ban cases, which include magazine bans, that have been floating around, and the Supreme Court has not talked about it at all. I have a suspicion, because they know that essentially the defense against them, whether it be Massachusetts' assault weapons ban or California's assault weapons ban or Maryland's assault weapons ban, the discussion of it's not going to come down to, is a 15-round limit okay, but not a 10-round limit? No, they're just going to say, this is bad. You can't do this. The Second Amendment supports it. So why not just rule broadly on all of these states in one fell swoop, because it's the same argument is my thought. So we will see. There's a chance that maybe the judges have seen enough of the writing on the wall, and that's why they wanted to go en banc, and that would allow the more judges to rule against it and dissent in it if they felt that was a politically smart move for them, while still not overturning Judge Benitez. I don't know.
That's a very charitable interpretation. I don't know if it's true or not. Time will tell. I do want to point out that just because it has gone to en banc they haven't made the decision yet. I forgot a very key point. So what happened was the state of California, in addition to the appeal, filed for a stay. In other words, Dear Ninth Circuit, while we're waiting for you to rule, would you please keep this law from going into effect? And they said yes. So Benitez's rule has been stayed. It has not gone into effect. There has not and will not be another Freedom Week until such time as the case is heard, which is going to be later this month. I want to say October 10th. I'm not really sure where I got that. So it will be fairly soon. And then we will find out whether or not they're going to uphold Benitez's decision or not. I don't think they will.
Yeah, I will just note that that essentially the one thing that gives me that a little bit of justification for my Pollyanna view on this is that this is very much against the standard procedure of the gun prohibitionists, which is do everything as incrementally and as slow as possible to just keep the wheels grinding while you are passing more unconstitutional laws. But the plausible deniability of are we breaking the law, or are we just breaking what you think is the law? But we still need to hear about what the law is. But we still need to prepare for our case, and so we need an extension, Judge. And
of course, the California Rifle and Pistol Association, who I don't know if they're one of the plaintiffs. I believe so. They have actually filed an opposition to stay the stay. There's been no ruling on that yet. And that announcement was as of September 30th, which was Saturday. So unless they held the hearing today, which, I feel like if they had, then maybe we would have heard something about it. So I'm guessing that they haven't made a ruling on the opposition to the stay. And they may just, when I say they, I mean the en banc panel may just let the clock run out because, it's confirmed. It's October 10th, and so it's just a week. They might just say, look, we're going to make a decision in a week. Just chill out.
So we shall see, and we'll report on that when it happens. But I've got to say that I actually do have a good feeling, and maybe that's me being a Pollyanna, but that the reason why they're skipping this step, and as a general rule, we have not seen any steps skipped by the gun prohibitionists, because they know they've got all the cards they're ever going to get. And so the sooner they meet with SCOTUS is the sooner they lose everything that they hold dear. So they're delaying as much as they can. So the fact that they are taking a big step over, several steps in this process, they had to have done it for a reason.
Oh, I'm sure they did it for a reason. We're just haggling as to what that reason is. Mm-hmm. I do sincerely hope you're right.
Yeah, me as well. We shall see. But then again, also, there's a part of me that would almost be happy to see it get kicked up to the Supreme Court, because, again, I am looking forward to that battle royale that will just be not only like, NYSERPA, where it is specifically ruling on the state of New York, but it could rule on, I believe, I think there is one for every assault weapons ban that's on the books in the United States out there. So in theory, it could rule against all the assault weapons bans in existence, and that would send a very clear message.
By the way, Pink Pistols filed an amicus brief in support of the plaintiff back when this was Duncan versus Becerra. So we've got a dog in this fight, and we'll see if that's taken into account or not.
Well, excellent. Now on to something we do every day.
In this segment, Miles talks about the ABCs. Always be carrying.
Hi, this is Miles again, and this time I'm talking about EDC items. And when I say EDC items, I'm not talking wallets, keys, cell phones, watches. Those are things my 15-year-old carries. I'm talking about things that are carried as tools that you may not ever use, or you may use every day, but they are the tools that you need pretty much in everyday life, or as a specialty item that you carry for emergencies. So we're talking pocket knives, handguns, multi-tools, first aid kits, tourniquets, pepper spray, and tasers. So start off, pocket knives. When I say a pocket knife, we're talking something with a folding blade in a reasonable size that you can carry in your pocket. We're not talking about the cold steel pocket folding scimitar. We're talking like a Benchmade, a Spyderco, CRKT, something along those lines that you carry on for opening packages, cutting things, cutting food. And I personally carry 3 on a normal basis. My job allows me to do stuff like that. I have one that I use for cutting open cardboard boxes and other stuff that's going to mess up the blade pretty quick. Then I have a second one that I have for if I need to cut something and I need an actual sharp edge. And then I have a third one that I use for food only. When I get a block of cheese, a block of pepperoni for a snack, I can cut it, little pieces off of it, an apple, something like that. Multi-tools, yes, they do have a blade, but they're not carried for their blades. As a general rule, they're your screwdriver, your pliers, your saw, stuff along those lines. And they can be Leathermans, SOG, Gerber, Swiss Army even. Again, these are things that are used for their tools that you carry on your belt or in a pocket, and they're not the quick access, but you have them when you need them. A first aid kit or tourniquet. This is the one item I personally don't carry. I should, and I want to correct that. I want to get a stop to bleed class under my belt, and then I want to start carrying a first aid kit or at least a tourniquet with me. Because out of all the things that you can carry on you that can save your life or somebody else's, it is one of the better ones to have. And it can be the more useful one in an emergency situation, because you're more likely to need to stop somebody from bleeding than cause somebody to bleed. The next thing out there is your pepper sprays, your chemical sprays of one sort or another. They're great, non-lethal protection device. The downside is you do have to be careful where you use it. Small confined spaces or windy days, they can be very detrimental to yourself and not your attacker, or as well as your attacker. And you need to know how to use them and how to aim them so that you don't grab it backwards and accidentally spray yourself or something along those lines. Then you have your stun guns and tasers. Again, another great device that can be used for self-protection, non-lethal style. And it's not a bad idea. There are certain places where that's what you need. Again, you do need to know how they work and how to use them. But you don't have to worry about hurting somebody else permanently. And of course, you have your handgun. And I use handgun, not pistol, because I'm not these people who think a AR pistol is an EDC item. No, that's not. That's something you might keep in as a truck gun, or you might carry when you're out on like military maneuvers, but it isn't something you're going to carry on you every day. We're talking about a reasonable sized, depending on your personal preference, handgun. I know some people that carry a full-size 1911. That's their choice. Makes it a little bit more difficult to find ways to conceal it if you conceal, but it is doable. I personally have 3 handguns that I keep in rotation for my EDC, and I think that's the maximum I would do, which are 2 of them are my Canik MC9 and my Elite SC. They're both the smaller frame ones, but they also have red dots on them, and the SC also has a laser light combo. The laser I don't care about, but the light is important for at times. And that's depending on how much space I have to conceal. It depends on which one of those I will use. And the third one is my Ruger Max 9. That one is for when I need to keep it concealed in, let's say, a pocket, where the red dot on the other 2 make it a little bit difficult. But, so if I'm going to a wedding, a funeral, something like that, where I can't have it on my belt, then I'm going to put it in the pocket, the Max 9. The other items that are a good idea and I think are great for most people to carry that are not necessarily self-defense things, a pocket flashlight, a little pen light, because you never know when you might need to find something in the dark. If you drop those keys of yours while you're walking out to your car and you can't find them real quick and you need a light, you don't want to have to pull out your handgun with a light on it. You want to just have a little pen light to help you find something. Another item I carry on me is a metal-bodied pen, which one is a pen, but also on the back end of it is a glass breaker. Again, it's one of those things, I was in a car wreck, I need to get out, doors won't work, I can take it, smash the window. Yes, a full-size glass breaker would be better, but I can't always carry a full-size glass breaker in my pocket. There are many other items that you might think about carrying as a EDC, and I am more than welcome to hear other people's thoughts on each of the different items, but those are the ones that I personally find to be good and helpful in a everyday carry. We're not talking occasional carry, we're talking everyday. Again, keys, wallet, cell phone, watch, those aren't everyday. They're things you just have on you because you need to have them. You aren't going to leave the house without your wallet because you don't know when you're going to need your ID, your money. You're not going to leave your house without your keys unless you're going out for a jog. But still, you might even need the keys anyways because you might need to be able to get back into your own house. Phone, I don't know anybody who leaves their phone behind anymore. And if they do, well, they're probably older than me. And lastly, your watch. Hell, if somebody has a watch, they use it. It's a thing to check the time, or if it's a smartwatch, you might also check the weather. But it is not something that you're using as a tool. It is just a watch. Thank you for listening, and if you have any questions, comments, or any feedback, please let Weer'd or Aaron know, and I'll be more than happy to address it. Thank you, and have a great night.
I will have you know, Miles, I do own a folding scimitar. It's not a great EDC, but it does put smiles on faces.
So one thing I want to point out, and I hope it doesn't seem like I'm, coming down hard on Miles, but as someone who has used a glass breaker it wasn't on a pen, it was on a folding pocket knife. It's not great. And I would really like to recommend a purpose-built tool for escaping a car, and there's a link to it in the show notes. It's called the ResQme, and it is a combination seatbelt cutter and spring-loaded window breaker, and you can get one for $10. And you can attach it to a keyring, and so you can have it, on your car keys, or you can have it dangling from the rearview mirror, or all sorts of different places. And it's cheap enough that you can have multiple ones. And I think that would work far better in an emergency situation than a pen. Plus, you can use it to cut yourself out of a seatbelt or other type of fabric that is restraining you from escaping.
Yeah, I don't know the mechanics behind it, but if you are in a severe enough accident that you're going to need to be creative to get out of the car, pushing the button on the seatbelt release is not going to help at all. You're going to need to cut that belt off, and so
and you might just not have enough room, or you might be injured. You might not have the strength to swing the pen in order to break the glass. This thing, you just put it up against the glass and you push and it breaks. It's fantastic.
Yeah, no, that is a great tool, and tuck those in various places. But I will also say that if you are going to tuck it somewhere in your car, make sure it is secured to a part of your car that you can reach from the driver's seat, because there's a good chance that if you're in such a situation that you aren't able to open the door or unbuckle your seatbelt, things may be all over the place if they aren't tied down.
Which is why I think a good place to put it is on your key ring. You should be able to get to it in that case. And
Aaron, is it the Boy Scouts motto, Semper Paratus?
No.
That's the Coast Guard, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
It is the Coast Guard. Okay. Apologies to the Coast Guard that I confused you with the Boy Scouts. That was not a slight to our dearest. This is a slight. It's all the fishing boats always referred to the Coast Guard as the Kansas Navy, because there was a ton of Midwestern boys on those boats, because maybe the full-fledged Navy seemed a little bit much, so the Coast Guard was a better choice. Not a major slight. Love the Coast Guard. As a fisheries observer, I interacted with the Coast Guard a lot, and they were absolutely wonderful people. And so, hats off to the Coast Guard. But again, their motto is Semper Paratus, always prepared. And I do have to say that I think Aaron and I definitely fall under the Semper Paratus category of, we want to have a bat belt on. We want to have a widget and a doohickey for every situation whatsoever. I just started up a conversation with someone today, and they were talking about using a mag light to smash a car window because a kid was locked inside the car with the keys. And they're like, well, do you want to pay for, do you want to pay for a new, do you want to keep your window, or do you want your kid back? And I was at that exact moment, I was so upset that I couldn't pull out my jiggler key set, which is a set of pressed out tools that kind of look like car keys, and they can be used to pick wafer locks like a car door quite easily. Actually, I need to practice with them, because I actually haven't been able to get a car door open just yet with them, but give me time. And the fact that, why wouldn't I have the jiggler keys on me in the event that a kid's locked in a car and I could get them out? But I've never been in a situation where I've wanted to break a window of a car to let somebody out of a car. But there's certainly that idea. But there's also people that kind of follow the never paratus rule. And I've definitely known people that sometimes they leave the house without even their house keys. And then need to find a way back in. They leave the house without their wallet. And it's alien to me, but at the same time, those people are still alive. So it's certainly something to think about in our when coming up with our EDC regiment.
I do want to point out, and it was something that never really occurred to me until just now, just how close the Boy Scout motto is to that of the Coast Guard. So the Boy Scout motto is be prepared.
Okay.
Whereas the Coast Guard is semper paratus, always prepared. It's pretty much the same thing, just a slight differentiation on doing versus being.
Yeah. And it also makes me feel better for confusing the two of them because, that is very close.
Mm-hmm.
I think the only other thing I have to add for Miles' segment is that his statement about having a small carry gun stable is, I think, very, very good. I think that every carry gun that you own should fill a niche, should fill a niche, and there should be a reason for it. And then after that, I think it's good to not add too much stuff in there. Obviously, we have a friend who made a Kydex holster for a C96 broom handle Mauser. And so they're able to carry that, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend that as a carry gun, despite the fact that a broomhander Mauser would be a perfectly fine defensive weapon if you can conceal it. But having that many different manuals of arms could be a problem in the event of, I ended up pulling a 1911, but I wasn't sure if I was carrying the 1911 or the Glock today. The one exception I could say is if you've got 1,000,001 striker fired pistols that are all the magazine releases in the same place, the slide releases in the same place, doesn't have a manual safety, I guess that's fine, but still, why?
Yeah, I would agree that the broom handle Mauser is not a good carry gun, but it's a fantastic barbecue gun.
Fantastic barbecue.
All right, so for this next segment, I'm going to let Weer'd introduce it because there are some audio issues. I had problems understanding it. I think what we should do, Weer'd, is include a link in the show notes to your script so people can follow along.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's fair. Something happened with the recording on this. I don't know what it is. I did the best I can to fix it. I'll probably do a little bit more work in post-production. But yeah, there might be some parts that are a little bit garbled. But essentially, I found a new well for anti-gun stuff, and that is Bloomberg documentaries. And this one is on the epidemic of gun violence. So as you may know, I have channels I stalk when looking for audio to Fisk. Obviously, Everytown, Moms Demand Actions, Giffords, and the Brady campaign were once lush fields of anti-gun propaganda. And back in the Gun Blog Variety Cast days, when I produced exactly 0 podcasts every week, I was able to come up with a weird audio Fisk from one of them every week. That being said, the well isn't as lush as it once, nor are the anti-gun media groups like NPR, CNN, and MSNBC. But I found a new well to Bloomberg Originals. This is owned by Bloomberg News, and they make short documentaries on various political topics. And yes, it's that Bloomberg. And after this video ends, a card comes up that reads, Michael Bloomberg, founder and majority owner of Bloomberg News, parent Bloomberg LP, is a backer of Everytown for Gun Safety, which advocates gun safety measures. The group had no role in the making of this film. Well, first up, Michael Bloomberg is also the founder of Everytown, and it's simply a rebrand of Mayors Against Illegal Guns, where he and Boston's own Thomas Menino were the founding mayors. And with the late Tom Menino, it was doubtful he could even read or write, so we all know who was driving the bus with that partnership. Further, Everytown and its subsidiaries do nothing for gun safety. Instead, they present bills for gun bans and restrictions on the rights of gun owners. Now, if you think this is the biggest lie of the documentary, well, I really don't think you're that gullible.
This is not meant to be sensational, right? There's no need for us to sensationalize any data. But the truth of the matter is, for the last 2 to 3 years now, guns have been the leading cause of death among kids.
Wow, they really start this one off with a doozy. This is literally the first line of the documentary. As far as the CDC's actual numbers go, the leading cause of death for children is unintentional injury. And the 10 to 14 age bracket, suicide becomes number 2. But note, that's only 580 deaths a year. and roughly 50% of suicides are with firearms. And the 15 to 24 demographic, you see homicide as the number 2 cause of death. Still, we're talking about the second leading cause of death, and that demographic is half adults. So not only do they start off with a lie, but they also gaslight you saying, we have no reason to sensationalize the data. Clearly you do. And it might have to do with Bloomberg and his money, or devotion to partisan politics over truth and honesty. Maybe it's a little bit of both. Either way, this documentary is entitled America's Biggest Public Health Crisis May Be Guns. And buckle up, because this is going to be a bumpy ride.
Physicians are treaters of the sick and preservers of the healthy. So there really is nothing else that a group of physicians would rally behind other than saving lives.
I can't speak for the gun prohibition movement, but the Second Amendment defenders are certainly out there to save lives. Don't believe me? How often do you hear a Second Amendment supporter cite the statistic that 90% of all defensive gun uses end with no shots being fired? Deadly force scenarios that end with 0 death? Success! We carry a gun to protect life, not to end it. And if we can spare the life of the attacker, that's not a bad thing. Of course, we'll also see in this segment that saving lives is not the anti-gunners' first priority. Is not the gun prohibitionists' first priority.
This epidemic is uniquely American.
Just another flat-out lie. Only way the United States has the highest rate of gun violence is by discarding all other nations that have higher rates of gun violence. And their methods make 0 sense. The one that does make sense is excluding countries at war. I can understand that gunshot wounds skyrocketed when Russian infantry invaded Ukraine. But many of the models exclude Mexico because of their troubles with the drug trade. But isn't that why the inner city gangs that drive up gun violence in this country exist? Don't we have a war on drugs? They also exclude low-income countries. Guns are expensive. Why would a poor person keep a gun, especially in a country where gun laws are extensive and draconian, when they could sell it for food and medicine and buy a machete or a pipe wrench to do crime?
Gun violence is a public health issue and a healthcare issue.
This is a political buzzword that should immediately reveal their agenda. This is an attack on the Dickey Amendment, which prevents CDC funding from being used to advocate gun control. Which is ironic when we're watching a high production value documentary funded by billionaire Michael Bloomberg.
America supports all these bills. And it needs to be the time now where the politicians realize that if government doesn't back us, that they're going to be voted out.
Now, I'll note that at no point in this documentary do they mention any specific bills. And the only policies that are mentioned are the standard gun bans and rights restrictions we've been hearing about for the last 30 years. All of these policies have been proven not to work. So what backlash are the politicians going to face? I mean, besides Michael Bloomberg pulling their funding.
We have seen that when we take public health approaches, that we save lives. Motor vehicle accidents are no longer the number 1 cause of death of children because of safer cars and car seats.
Now in the video, they show cigarette smoking, which is a major boon to public health. When I was a kid, people smoked My parents didn't smoke, but I remember my mom bringing out an ashtray at a dinner party so guests could smoke in our house. And now my neighbors who smoke don't even smoke in their own home. You see them out on their porch having a butt. And rather than most people on my street smoking like it was in the 80s, most people are non-smokers. But this bit on auto safety is murky at best. Young kids account for a very small fraction of auto fatalities. And further, the average number of miles driven by Americans is going down. And I'm not seeing any post-pandemic numbers. And they haven't yet released the post-pandemic. Obviously, the highways were a wasteland. We used to do a weekly drive into Boston just to run the cars. And even in the heart of the city, traffic was almost nothing. And now, many workforces have incorporated remote work into the corporate model, meaning less commuting. So the numbers in the show notes are probably even lower today. Less time in the car, less chances of getting in a wreck.
We can use that same public health approach to discuss guns and gun safety legislation and create meaningful change.
So we've already established that this documentary is built on a foundation of law. Hey, but we can trust her when she says her agenda will promote gun safety. Spoiler alert, she's pushing the same failed politics that have been causing major problems for the last 30 years.
A typical day is going from meeting to meeting, no breaks, labbing all day, and presenting our statistics and data and research.
Translation: I spend all day lying to people to earn my money from Michael Bloomberg. Note that she's a medical doctor who claims to want to save lives. We're believing that she's going to save more lives lying to politicians than, practicing medicine?
I usually try to open and say, my name is Dr. Emily Lieberman. I'm a pediatrician, a wife, a mother. I am now also a mass shooting survivor. And I have the unfortunate but unique perspective of now being a survivor of gun violence and also a pediatrician who treats people in the community who have suffered from gun violence.
So she was at the Independence Day parade in Highland Park, Illinois, but she and her family weren't harmed in the event. Given how parades work, she may not have been in line of sight of the shooter. But she's a gun violence survivor. Guess what? Me too. I've totally been in Boston when the gangs have started shooting it out. I was also in Boston when the marathon bombing happened. That makes me a terrorism survivor. When you dilute victim status this much, it loses all value. Further, note that she treats gunshot wounds and saves lives in a suburb of Chicago. Gun control at work. We'll see more of this.
7 people were killed and more than 48 others were injured after a gunman opened fire at a 4th of July parade in Highland Park, Illinois. According to the Gun Violence Archive, it was one of 647 mass shootings that took place in 2022.
647 in 2022? Yeah, that number should be shocking to everyone. The Highland Park shooting was talked about for a week, and that was the #1 news story on most news outlets at the time of the shooting. And many were still talking about the massacre in Uvalde that happened a month before. Clearly, their definition of spree killing is vastly different than ours. And since the events that they always choose to talk about are the same ones that the FBI considered spree killings, of which there have been less than 400 in the last 20 years, clearly they're trying to mislead us. Of course, in case you didn't know, Gun Violence Archive is an anti-gun group designed to push a gun prohibitionist agenda.
Unfortunately, we've learned that we can't keep our children safe when most of these weapons are on the streets. But what we can do is help prevent these shootings from continuing to occur, which is what we are here to do now for the rest of our life.
This talk is blatant child abuse if children are allowed to hear. #1, her kids are safe. It sucks that they were in a parade that got shot up, but their momentary exposure to gun violence is what inner city children live through most nights. #2, this shooting was in Illinois, which has some of the highest gun control laws in the country. California is also a hotbed of spree shooting. Claiming that you're just going to do more of that and expect the violence to stop is the definition of insanity, especially when you're using the inflated Gun Violence Archive numbers that declared most nights in the inner cities as the same as Highland Park and Uvalde.
We've here on the front lines have felt that 350% increase in the number of kids with gun injuries last year here in New York.
You catch that last bit? In New York City, as in the capital of gun control. I may claim that Massachusetts has the worst gun law. Many say California is the worst. New York State isn't that bad as far as gun laws go compared to Mass and Cali. But New York City might as well be Mexico City when it comes to gun control laws. Yet the doc is lamenting the rise in gunshot cases. Clearly, we need to use this success story as a template.
We have a universal screening program here in our emergency departments where we actually screen all patients for firearm injury risk. And if you screen positive for that, there are resources we can give you that help break that cycle of violence before the gunshot even happens.
This is actually a bit of effective policy. Hence why this documentary devotes 0 time to it. Turns out that violent behavior begets violence. And as the cliche goes, if you set your gun down, it'll do nothing until a person picks it up. So focusing on the person actually has potential to reduce violence. Because not only do guns not kill people, people kill people, but a person with a knife or a pipe wrench can kill you just as dead as if they had a dreaded AR-15.
AAP guidelines suggest that the best advice is to not have a gun in the home. But for those gun owners that actually do have guns, research shows that only 50% of them are safely storing it. So something that we give out to our patients are these cable locks.
Nobody's coming for your guns, they always say. Never mind that when they say the other thing.
Hell yes, we're going to take your AR-15, your AK-47. We're not going to allow it to be used against our fellow Americans anymore.
If I could have gotten 51 votes in the Senate of the United States for an outright ban, picking up every one of them, Mr. and Mrs. America, turn them all in, I would have done it.
But also, they say you should never have a gun in the home. Also adorable that they're handing out cable locks. A nice diversion from Curious Fingers. Also, most handguns come from the factory with a hard-sided container with a hole for a cable lock. And I believe all new handguns need to be sold with a cable lock. Neither of these things will prevent a gun from being used by a determined person, but it will keep a curious child safe. Still, this is just a copy of Project Child Safe that was created by the National Shooting Sports Foundation, as in the actual lobbying group for the gun manufacturing industry.
And it's really important that we start having this discussion in a very nuanced, granular way, because that is the only way that we're going to have a productive conversation around potential solutions. You can imagine that the solutions to firearm suicide are far different than the solutions needed to stop mass shootings, which are far different than the solutions that are needed for firearm violence. We cannot lump it all together.
This is totally correct. The solutions are vastly different between gun accidents, suicides, gang violence, spree killing, and domestic violence. But like violence intervention, this documentary will spend no time on any of those, because Michael Bloomberg is focused on an agenda that will help none of these things. Now, on to a short piece on a true survivor of gun violence.
Growing up in this neighborhood of gun violence, and it's always been prevalent, always something I've seen around me. It just never dawned on me that it could affect me in a way that would change my life.
Okay, we're back to Chicago. Again, one of the gun control capitals in America, and a place that even this person selected by Bloomberg in this deeply biased documentary openly admits hears gunshots almost every day. This is not true for most Americans. Most of us live in places where we don't hear gunshots every night, unless you live near a gun club or farmers shooting coyotes or feral hogs. As for him thinking it couldn't happen to him, maybe that's useful bravado, or maybe it's a lie, because I think there's more to his story that isn't being shared.
The night of the shooting, we had just went on a family outing, came back home, everyone was in bed. I decided to go back outside for a charger, and I was sitting in the passenger seat of the car, and all of a sudden someone runs up to the driver's side. They said something, waved some hand symbols, and that was it. They just started unloading.
I don't want to rag on the kid too much, as the video shows him graduating high school, and hopefully he's being a productive member of society. All that being said, even rural squares know what waved some hand signs mean. The would-be assassin was flashing gang signs. Now, this would be a great opportunity to make a sob story about a man caught in the crossfire of gang violence, like the murder of Hadiya Pendleton, who's the mascot of the Wear Orange anti-gun movement. She was killed in a case of mistaken identity gang violence. I deeply suspect this kid was involved in a gang, and he was shot by a member of a rival gang. Also, it isn't a stretch that he may have been doing more than just getting a charger from the car that night. Either way, this case or the case of Hadiya Pendleton are not success stories of gun control. They both happened in Chicago. Both stories are the hazards of gun violence, and we should be looking into disrupting the gangs and their cycles of violence, rather than taking the guns away from Americans who have zero connections to street violence.
Treating gunshot wounds and patients is extremely expensive. We know that treating a patient with gun injuries, for example, is 3 times more expensive than treating any other type of trauma. This really speaks to the complexities of the wounds, the complications that result from it, and the long, ongoing disabilities that really require a lot of intense medical management.
I linked an article that repeats his claim. What they don't discuss is the frequency of those visits. While they may cost more per patient, I bet every hospital in the U.S. spends more money patching up patients from auto wrecks just by sheer number. Hell, I bet motorcycle accidents outspend gunshot wounds in a head-to-head. Still, by them implying that gun violence is a leading cause of death and injury, and talking about how much it costs the system, they're making it seem like it's an economic crisis. So give up your rights, people, because they're just too expensive.
Our politicians who enabled this assault weapons ban in 1994 truly were trailblazers at the time. And sadly, the clause was written that it would sundown in 10 years. So from my perspective, we're asking Washington, D.C. to reinitiate a law that was a law. We're not rewriting the history books here. We are asking them to continue the history books.
Except violent crime went down after the sunset. Yes, the politicians who passed the 1994 assault weapons were blazing new ground. Before that, the only federal law that restricted classes of firearms was the NFA. And until the Hughes Amendment, you could just buy or make any of those guns, with just some extra paperwork and an inexcusable waiting period. But in September of 1994, you couldn't buy a new magazine that held more than 10 rounds. And you couldn't buy a new AR-15 with a bayonet lug or a threaded muzzle. And while the law was allowed to sunset in 2004, it still exists in pockets around the country, like here in Massachusetts. And these laws are all being challenged for violating the Constitution. So really, what they're asking Washington to do is break the law and pass a law that didn't work and won't stop any of the bad things they've been lamenting about this whole video.
The rates of gun violence are only going up. As we delved deeper and saw how much of a problem this is, these underserved communities, the health disparities, specifically brown and black communities, having horrific day-to-day gun violence and losing many more brown and black people to gun violence, we realized that we have to really broaden, as physicians, some of our lobbying.
They are certainly going up in minority communities that are awash in gun control. The waters are currently a bit muddy as the pandemic really threw the world into turmoil for a few years. But I get the impression that now violent crime is going back down to the 2019 numbers, which were the lowest in generations. And there are doubts that the numbers even went up at all. Of course, they mention minority communities. It's ironic given that most of America's gun control laws have their roots in two places. Number 1, Reconstruction South, and number 2, Nazi Germany. And the states affected by NYSERPA v. Bruin, it doesn't take much digging to find out that the poor and minority communities were most often the victims of police discretion.
We do know that gun safety policies, such as assault weapon bans, background checks, waiting periods, licensing requirements that most gun owners actually do support, will save lives. And then we know that other policies, for example, that address the root causes of structural racism, inequity, will improve firearm violence in inner city communities. So my question really always is, how can we have that conversation in a way that legitimizes both sides and their concerns, that can really lead to productive solutions rather than just this them versus us discussion?
Yes. All stuff gun owners support. The Constitution totally supports all that crap too. And yeah, they totally want to have a good-natured discussion about all of this with Second Amendment supporters. Said by a doctor in New York City, shilling for Michael Bloomberg's gun control agenda in a documentary that's a solid brick of lies. Pull the other one, Doc.
If this is the public health crisis that we believe it is, then gun violence prevention is going to be a priority in the next election, and these lawmakers need to be held accountable for their decisions.
Given that everything that they've been telling to us this entire video is demonstrably false and disproven in the show notes, I'm quite confident that this isn't the crisis you think it is. And if politicians are going to pay, the gun prohibition ones are the ones who should be on the electoral chopping block.
We're trying to change the narrative in our house to something terrible happened and our parents did everything possible to try to protect us, and teach them that despite adversity that might happen, we will always try to rise above it and find solutions to problems.
Something terrible happened in a place that has strict gun control laws, so we did everything we could do to make the safer parts of this country more like here.
But our question is back to the lawmakers. Have they done everything in their power to save lives?
Man, this is calculated. They said nothing but lies. And then they lay the threats at the feet of politicians that might oppose them. Thankfully, Michael Bloomberg's ability to control the narrative has slipped tremendously, meaning that while his paid lobbyists are working tirelessly to strip you of your rights, you and your fellow Americans can pick up the phone and call your representatives and let them know what their constituents really think. And to my left of center listeners, you too can let your representatives know that the Second Amendment is not a partisan issue. Those are your anti-gun talking points and a few rebuttals to combat them. Again, apologies for any audio issues that happened with that one, folks. Sorry, it sometimes happens.
Well, that's what you get for not being prepared and saving a backup.
That's true. Yeah, and I actually don't even think saving a backup would have helped, because I think there was, I don't know if I wasn't on the mic properly or what, but I think it was doomed from the start. So it was either do what I did or attempt to completely re-record it, which I didn't have time to do before the show started. Mm-hmm. So apologies.
So, having listened along to the excerpts and then read what you said, between the falsifications and the outright lies and all of the problems associated with this, and as you observed, it always seems like the people who come from anti-gun states want to make all of the other states anti-gun and increase the violence. I'm not doing a good job explaining my position. What I think it comes down to is this just stinks of propaganda. And I realize that at a certain point, all political things, either pro or against, are propaganda. But when I say that, I mean, this is right up there with, Soviet level propaganda, 1984, what are you going to believe, what we say or your own lying eyes as they read the facts? It's that level of, wow, look at the stones on this guy actually paying people to say these things, which we can disprove with links to evidence.
Yeah, it's all just pushing the propaganda and really being dishonest about it. Again, like persons say, oh, we're out here trying to save lives, and you're a doctor. Go cure sick people. Like, if you want to help people, like, save people. Aaron's mom is alive because of doctors. Nobody is alive because somebody pushed the assault weapons ban in 1994. And there's probably a bunch of people who are dead because of it. It's just super duper dishonest. Michael Bloomberg had no influence in the making of this video. Just so you know, I've got the audio for another one that's anti-gun. Oh, go figure. It's anti-gun. But Bloomberg had no input in this. Yeah, right.
I mean, let us not forget that the man literally has a school of medicine at Johns Hopkins named after him. And Weer'd, what does this school of medicine frequently produce?
Anti-gun research papers.
Gosh, there really isn't a conflict of interest here, is there?
Even better was that Michael Bloomberg bought out the CSGV, the oh shoot, I forget what that
Coalition to Stop Gun Violence?
Yes, Coalition to Stop Gun Violence. Thank you, Aaron. Yeah, also known as the crazy ex-girlfriend of the gun control world. Like, we've got, there's Brady and there's Everytown and there's Giffords and all of that. But like, these are people that have straight up stalked people, attempted to dox people. The media director for them actually gave an address that may or may not have been George Zimmerman's home address at the time of the Trayvon Martin shooting, assumingly so that someone might go over and do him harm. So yeah, they were crazy, and Michael Bloomberg ended up buying them out, shuttered them, and the key players for that group are all working at the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health.
Is GSCV the one that featured the, quote, Oompa Loompa of gun control, unquote?
Yes, that's Josh Horowitz, and he is one of the directors for the Bloomberg School of Gun Control. Or the Bloomberg School of Gun Violence. Yeah.
I think you were right the first time.
I mean, I was. The question is, did I tell the truth or did I tell the lie that's on his business cards?
Well, Weer'd. You know who doesn't lie?
Our listeners, well, they may lie, but they
Well,
don't.
actually, I was going to say hips. I was quoting Shakira, but you're also right. Our listeners don't lie either.
At least not to us, and we appreciate that. Thank you, each and every one of you, for listening to our show. We really do appreciate the ears and out there, but we also appreciate our fine supporters on Patreon. To become a Patreon patron, go to patreon.com/Assorted Calibers podcast to sign up. Patrons get an early release of the podcast, plus bonus content like the hilarious blooper reels, the ACP film tracks, and the ACP mag dump.
What kind of release do they get?
Early releases.
Okay.
Army training.
I mean, I'm not meaning to pick on you, but I guess I sort of am, but you like it. It kind of sounded like you said early release.
It's
you and your Yankeeisms.
It's late and I'm turd.
Also, please remember to rate us on Apple Podcasts, the only podcast platform that you can rate, apparently. Subscribe to us on the platform of your choice and share the show with your friends, both online and off.
I have gotten word that Google Podcasts may be going away, and they're going to be rolling it into YouTube Music. So
yes, I'd gotten that email as well. So I guess you'll be able to thumbs up or thumbs down. Maybe I don't exactly know how YouTube Music works.
I ended up downloading the app just because. I mean, it's kind of important for me to try to figure out how this works. And I wasn't able to listen to any podcasts on it, and I think it was asking me for money, so we will see. Right now, continue to listen to us on Google Podcasts because you can, and it doesn't cost you money. But if anybody knows anything about, YouTube Music and podcasts and all that, reach out to us because I'm a bit nervous because this is our baby.
I'm sure it's going to be awful.
I mean, we've had so much nice things to say about Google and YouTube.
They have never failed to disappoint.
Oh, this is my turn. Mm-hmm. You can get more from me at my blog, blog, which is weirdworld.com, and hear me weekly on Handgun Radio on the Firearms Radio Network.
And you can get more from me at linktree/Aaron Paulette. That's linktree.ee/Aaron Paulette, all one word.
And thanks to Nate Spencer for our music.
So Weird suggested I make a reference to the strange cell phone statement earlier, and I decided not to do that because I am a classy lady, whereas Weirdbeard puts the ass in class. Our refinement levels are assorted, and so's our podcast. Good night, everyone.
No lies detected. Good night.